This is lesson 6.3a. We are going to be writing percents that are greater than 100 or less than 100 as fractions and as decimals. So let's start by looking at example 1 here. It says Jan and Kim built model cars for a science project. Kim's car traveled 140% as far as Jan's car. How can you write 140% as a fraction and as a decimal? So we know that 100% is the whole. So if there is a percent that's larger than 100%, that means that it's going to be more than one whole. So in this case, Jan's car travels 100%, which is one whole. Well, look at Kim's car. Kim travels one whole plus another 40%. So that's why the percent can be greater than 100. But the directions say to write the 140% as a fraction and as a decimal. So let's start by writing. So if we have fraction, decimal, and percent. So let's start by writing our 140%. Oops, that says 14%. I wanted to say 140%. So percent, what does percent mean? Percent means over 100. So in order to write 140% as a fraction, I would write 140 over what number? Over 100. So 140 over 100 is an improper fraction. We can also simplify this. So how can we simplify 140 over 100? We can simplify and divide both the top and the bottom by 20. So 140 to 100 is the same thing as 140 divided by 20 is 7. 100 divided by 20 is 5. So 7/5 would be our fraction simplified there. Now, how do we write this fraction as a decimal? Well, what do you have to do to write a fraction as a decimal? We can put it into our calculator. So either put 140 divided by 100 or 7 divided by 5. And as a decimal, you should get 1.40. Now, the reason there is a one whole here is, again, because remember, 140% is going to be more than a whole. If we said that 100% is the whole, 140% is going to be more than a whole. So here we have 1 and 40 hundredths. And this is where reading the fraction and then writing it is a little complicated, because 140 hundredths, we still have to make sure that this number ends in the hundredths place, which we do. 1 and, if we read this decimal number, it says 1 and 40 hundredths. Now let's look at this. Try it. The area of a new movie theater is 225% of the area of the old theater. What is 225% as a fraction and as a decimal? So first step, rewrite 225% as a fraction. Percent means over 100, so you should have 225 over 100. And how can you simplify this? We can divide them both by 25. 25 is the biggest number that goes into both 225 and 100. So simplified, we would get 9/4. So 225% is the same thing as 225 to 100, which is also 9/4. Now, to write this as a decimal, we could plug it into our calculator. 9/4 or 225 hundredths is the same thing as what? How do we write that as a decimal? The answer, you plug it into your calculator, you should get 2.25 as the decimal. And if we wanted to check it, you move that decimal point 2 values to the right, and look, that matches our original percent. Now let's look at example 2, which we have a fraction percent. So we have to write a fraction percent less than 1 as a fraction and as a decimal. So if we look at this hundreds cube, half of a percent is going to be less than the whole there. Remember we said that 1% is one box? Well, 1/2 of a percent is half of a box. So we have to write 1/2 of a percent as a fraction. Well, let's get started by solving this the same way that we normally do. If we have 1/2 of a percent, let's write that as a fraction. So we take that number, the 1/2, I'm going to rewrite it, 1/2 over 100. It looks funky, I know, but let's just use the same procedures. You take the number, you write it over 100. Now let's think about what this means. This really means 1/2 divided by 100. So I'm running out of room here. I'm just going to erase this. You should be writing this all in your notebook. 1/2 divided by 100, right? 1/2 over 100 is the same thing as this 1/2 divided by 100. Well, now we're dividing some fractions here. Let's review dividing fractions. Both have to be fractions. Now, in order to divide fractions, what do we follow? We follow keep, change, flip. So we keep the 1/2 the same. We change the division to what? To a multiplication. And we flip 100 over 1 to 1 over 100. Now we look to see, can we simplify before multiplying here? Nope, but we can multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 100 is 200. So 1/2 of a percent is the same thing as 1 over 200. Wow. 1 over 200. Okay. So you use the same starting step. You write the fraction over 100. Percent means per 100. Then think about what that per 100 means. It's really, we're dividing. A fraction is division. So you have to divide the fractions using keep, change, flip, and your answer is still a fraction, 1 over 200. So far we got 1/2 of a percent is the same thing as 1 over 200. So now how do I write a fraction as a decimal? I put it into my calculator. 1 divided by 200 is 0.005. And we can prove that because if we look at 1 over 200, I want to see, can I write it as a fraction with a 10 in the denominator? Does 200 go into 10 evenly? No. Tenths? Nope. Okay, next I have my hundredths place value. Does 200 go into 100 evenly? Nope. But does 200 go into 1,000 evenly? Yes, it does. 200 times 5 is 1,000. Well, whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Times 5, 1 times 5 is 5. And that matches. 5 1,000ths is the same thing as this decimal. 5 1,000ths. Okay, so this is a small percentage, half of a percentage, half of a percent. But we can still write it as a decimal and as a fraction using other things that we've learned this year that we're now reviewing with this concept. Let's do one more question. Let's look at number 6. We have 3/10 of a percent. So first step, write our percent as a fraction. 3/10 over 100. Percent means over 100. So now let's write out this division. We have 3/10 divided by 100. Well, in order to divide with fractions, they both have to be fractions. So 3/10 divided by 100 over 1. Next step, keep, change, flip. So you keep the 3/10. You change your division to multiplication. You flip your 1 over 100. 100 over 1 becomes 1 over 100. Now we can multiply straight across. 3 times 1, 3. 10 times 100, 1,000. How do we write 3/1000ths as a decimal? So we wrote 0.3% as a fraction. Last step, how do you write that as a decimal? You either read it and fill it in on the place values, or you plug it into your calculator. 3/1000ths, you should get 0.10ths, hundredths, 3 in the thousandths place. So 0.3% is equal to 3 over 1,000, which is equal to 3 thousandths.